In this video, we'll be going over utilizing and modifying Story Framework's custom dynamic camera system. So let's jump right into it. Firstly, we're going to start off by explaining what Story Framework's custom camera system is. So Story Framework's custom camera system is a player camera manager blueprint. So if we navigate to our blueprints folder, we can see here we have a SF player camera underscore player camera manager. This camera manager controls all functionality inside the Story Framework. If we navigate over to our example character, you will notice that the actual character blueprint does not have any sort of camera component attached to it. The system it works completely independently. So if we go back to our player controller blueprint that is included in the example, we'll find in our class defaults, under player camera manager class, we see our SF player camera underscore PCM. Now that we have explained what the camera system is and where it's implemented, let's go over modifying some camera settings. So if we navigate over to our player controller blueprint, where we implement the SF camera manager actor component, if we click on this component, we will see we have a camera settings structure. So under the structure will be all the settings for all the different camera modes and presets. We start off with sensitivity settings, so this includes mouse sensitivity and gamepad sensitivity. The reason sensitivity settings exists is because the camera system uses look input inside its player camera manager blueprint. So if we go back over to the player camera manager, we can see we have the camera look function, which handles turning the player, etc. So let's go back over to our player controller blueprint. We go on to our next settings. We have initial camera preset. So this will be the camera preset that is used when the game is first started or loaded. So you can see here we have third person. General camera lag is the camera lag that is applied to the camera. Then we have third person settings. So if you're using the third person preset, we have 4 different variables here for the different settings for the camera. We have camera distance. So this would be the camera distance away from the player character. We have the field of view of the camera. We have the camera Z offset from the ground or from the origin of the player character. Then we have shoulder distance from center. This will be an offset value applied to the player camera from the origin of the player character. Next we have first person settings. So we have the head Z offset. This applies similarly to the camera Z offset for third person. So this would be an offset from the ground up or the player character's origin. Field of view is the field of view of the first person camera. Lean angle is the amount of rotation applied when leaning. Lean distance from origin is the offset that gets applied to the camera when leaning. So reducing this to a lower value would, in essence, not allow the character to lean out to, say, past a wall or around a corner. Then we have transition settings. So this is the base transition curve. We'll leave this as default. Generally, we would never change this curve unless you are creating a very specific type of transition. We have lean speed, how fast the player leans in whichever direction. We have the shoulder change speed. So if you're in third person, this would determine how fast the player changes shoulders. We have look behind speed. So this is used when the character or when the player uses the look behind function when in first person. So this determines how fast that is. Lastly, we have fixed settings. This should generally be left default since for the most part this camera preset will not be used as an initial camera preset. This would more be used for gameplay, so things like NPC dialog when changing between different camera cuts, or using the fixed camera preset area blueprint, which will be touched on further in the video. Now let's dive into setting up some examples and explaining some functions included on the player camera manager. So I have these two light switch interactable actors set up here for demonstration. We have a custom tutorial switch string variable exposed here to swap between different functionality whilst using the same actor. So let's edit this blueprint. Let's say of A, we will demonstrate the look at target function. So let's go back to our level. We'll be using this whiteboard static mesh as an example. So let's give this actor a tag. Let's call it demo, just so that we can reference this actor easily inside the switch blueprint. So off of A, we're going to do a get player camera manager. And we're going to simply call look at target. So this is a BPI call straight to the player camera manager. In our case, this would be the SF player camera manager. So let's do a get all actors with tag. Get a reference to the first index. Let's do demo. And then we're going to drag off this and we get actor location. Connect this all up here. Let's give it a speed. Let's make the speed 1 second, so it'll take a second to look at the target. Let's give this a test. Now when we press this button, the camera will turn and look at the static mesh actor. Now let's show off the soft focus function. So inside Story Frameworks demo, you can find this being utilized already. So when you are playing and you press right click, the player's camera will perform a soft zoom or soft focus. So this can be used for maybe tracking objects across a scene, or slightly zooming in to focus on a target. This function can also be called, so let's right click in this blueprint, do a get player camera manager. We can drag over this and search for the soft focus PPI call. Then we have a focus multiplier and the speed. Let's make the speed 1 second and the focus multiplier, let's make it 0.5. So this is a toggleable function, so if you want to stop focusing, you would need to recall this function with stop. So let's give this a test. If we hop in here, click this button, the character will zoom in. We can take it one step further and turn this into a flip-flop. And the second time this button is pressed, we'll just simply stop the soft focus. Now let's demonstrate swapping and editing camera settings at runtime. So if we go back into the switch blueprint, let's drag off of B. We can do a get player camera manager and call preset transition. So this will change your camera's preset to a new desired preset. So this is used for example swapping between first person and third person. Let's say for this one we'll swap to first person when the button is pressed. The preset transition function uses the same settings from your player controller's SF camera manager. So when it swaps to different modes, it will find it inside the structure and use that data for the camera. So let's test this. When we press this button, it changes our camera to first person. We press it again, nothing will happen because we're already in first person. Now let's look at changing camera settings at runtime. So we can do the same thing. We call a set camera settings. So this can be used to manually change these settings. So if we drag off and search a mic, all these settings can be changed, all the individual structures can be edited. Now let's go on to utilizing the fixed camera settings or fixed camera mode. So for this example, I have 2 camera actors set up in this level purely for reference. The player camera manager does not use any external actors for any sort of camera work besides sequences and cutscenes. If we hop into our content browser, we go to core, example, level actors and triggers. We have the set camera preset area. So we're going to demonstrate how this works. Let's bump up the area size to something like 500 by 500 by 500. Let's position this so it covers the general area of this room. So we have a few options here. We have use if preset condition. So this will essentially tell the area blueprint that when the character walks into it, if it should change the camera settings or camera preset dependent on the current camera preset that the player is using. So we would generally leave this default because this would need to be conditional for most cases when changing to a fixed camera. So we're going to do if current preset is, let's do third person. We're going to set the new preset to fixed. We're going to do use new control rotation. So when the player overlaps this actor and changes to a fixed camera, it can also change the player's control rotation dependent on where you would want the player's forward direction to be. It should leave the new control rotation to 0, 0, 0. So this means the player's forward direction would be on the x-axis. So now let's change some of the fixed preset settings. So let's change the field of view to something like 75. The fixed transform, so for this area we're going to use this camera's transform. So we can just simply copy the location and insert it into the fixed transform location. Same thing with the rotation. Paste it here. Scale we can leave. Now that we have our transform all set up, this can be left default. Then we have soft focus character. So this will slightly rotate the fixed camera in the player's general direction while the character is moving around. And then we have lock input transitioning. So this would be used if your project is using both first person and third person. If you're giving the player the ability to swap between these presets, then you would generally leave this as default true, since we don't want the player to be able to change to a different camera preset while he's inside of the fixed area. So let's give this a test. When we hit play and move into this area, we'll see the camera swaps to the fixed camera. And you'll notice when we move out of the area, the camera does not transition back. So this will be manually set up with another camera preset area. So let's slightly shrink this down and insert it to the end of the area, the original area. Let's do the same settings. We're going to do if the camera preset is fixed, we're going to change back to third person. And that should be just about it. We walk into this area now, we'll swap over to the fixed camera, we walk out, we'll swap back into third person. Let's set the new control rotation to be on the UI. So let's change this value to -90. So when the player exits this area, you'll be facing the same direction as the hallway when he comes out. So chaining these preset areas together, we can create some more dynamic gameplay in your levels. As you can see here, we have 2 of these set up, so when walking through these corridors, these camera cuts change. And then when we walk out this side, it transitions back to third person. So that should just about cover your introduction to editing and utilizing the camera system found inside Story Framework.